welcome to the CA3 Climate Action and Advocacy on the Airwaves podcast. My name is Simon Evans and I welcome you. This project was undertaken with the financial support of the University of Calgary's Mobilizing Alberta Climate Action Grant program. We are broadcasting on 90.9 FM CJSW in Calgary. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The City of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. I hope you enjoy your time here on the airwaves as we dive into the world of climate action.
Hello, and welcome to the Climate Action and Advocacy on the Airwaves. My name is Diana Lee, and I am a fourth-year Bachelor of Social Work student at the University of Calgary. Today, we'll be discussing the 2023 Northwest Territories wildfires and the evacuation of the homeless population in Yellowknife to Alberta. Now, I want you to do a small activity with me. As I walk you through the activity, I want you to take note of your thoughts and feelings. First, imagine that you're at work or school. You've been keeping up to date with all the news about the wildfires just outside of your community, but you aren't too worried about the wildfires, as reports have been saying that all the fires are under control. However, the smoke from the fires have become an alarming concern for you. As the day progresses, the situation takes a sudden turn. You receive an emergency alert on your phone warning that the wildfires have unexpectedly flared up and your immediate area is under evacuation orders. Panic sets in. Everyone around you rush to gather their belongings and evacuate the workplace or school. As you hurry to the nearest safe point, your mind is racing, not only about your own safety, but also for your friends and family who live and or work in various parts of your community. You wonder about their whereabouts and whether they're safe or not. You have been trying to reach them on your phone, but the cell phone networks are overloaded with panicked residents trying to communicate with their loved ones. On top of this uncertainty, the streets are clogged with traffic, and the air outside is even more suffocating with the smoke. You contemplate your escape route. However, you are not sure which is the best route to take, but you can already see the congested roads all over the building. You get in your car and you decide to take the most straightforward way to the emergency shelter that you know. At this point, the traffic has slowed to a crawling speed, and you become anxious while you sit there waiting. You start to think about your home, and not only are you worried about the state of your home, but also the belongings you will leave behind. What about the things you need? The items with sentimental value? You wonder if there's anything you can do to lessen the damage that may occur to your home, but you resist the urge to head home. After many hours, you finally make it to the emergency shelter with relief. However, the relief is short-lived. You realize that your friends and family are not at the evacuation center, and you cannot connect with them either. The cell phone networks are still overloaded. The room is filled with panic, uncertainty, and fatigue. Also, no one knows what is going to happen next and how long this will last for. You were just told to line up and get on a plane, which at this point is hundreds of people long. No one is telling you where you're heading, and you didn't even realize how dire the situation was until it was announced that all residents will be flown out of the community. At this point, what were your thoughts and feelings when you imagined this scenario? Did you consider what happened after the evacuation? This is one of many experiences of those affected by the 2023 wildfires faced. Now that we've gone through the exercise, I would like to turn the attention to how Canadian wildfires, climate change, and disasters relate to social and environmental justice issues. The effects of climate change reveal and exacerbate ongoing social issues, disproportionately impacting the most vulnerable. revealing great disparities between the disadvantaged and privileged. To complicate matters, these disparities are often compounded by intersecting forms of systemic oppression. Governmental institutions and policies become barriers when trying to access resources needed to cope after a disaster, making adaptability and recovery in the aftermath of a climate crisis especially challenging. This is where the concept of environmental injustice comes into play. Lena Dominelli, a social worker in the UK, defines environmental injustice as society's failure to ensure equitable distribution of Earth's resources in meeting human needs, simultaneously providing for the well-being of people and the planet Earth today and in the future. In the Canadian context, the disaster response frameworks and the resources mobilized in our community are at the very least often inadequate in meeting people's needs. I would even argue that it has the potential to further harm the individuals and marginalized communities if environmental degradation continues. This is especially the case when governments continue to perpetuate colonial violence by stripping the indigenous peoples and groups' land and resources away, on top of the systemic oppression that indigenous people continue to experience. In the next section, I will talk about the many challenges the unhoused evacuees experience. You'll notice the different ways of systemic harm and environmental injustice are shown in the stories and experiences of the homeless evacuees. During the 2023 Northwest Territories wildfires, the unhoused individuals and staff supporting the unhoused ran into many challenges during the emergency response. One of those challenges was locating the individuals not in shelters and living on the streets. What makes this search particularly difficult is that many of the unsheltered residents may be at the edges of society. There's a lack of knowledge of known locations of individuals, or they are part of the hidden homeless population, temporarily staying at someone's home. On top of the chaos trying to locate those not in shelter systems, the shelters themselves had a difficult time supporting their service users during the evacuation order. For the Yellowknife Women's Society, one of the biggest challenges was the lack of communication and coordination from various government branches during the evacuation. In a document that the Women's Society published titled Yellowknife Women's Society Evacuation Story, it details the 3-week evacuation timeline. It also shares the stories and lived experiences of the service users and the staff during evacuation. There was a lot of confusion and unclear roles when it came to transporting their service users to safe areas. The Women's Society wanted to keep their groups together, but many participants ended up separated and scattered across Alberta, away from their support staffs, despite initial promises of group accommodation from the Northwest Territories Health and Social Services Authority. While shelters had prepared a list of their service users and their information, this still broke down the networks that the homeless residents and agencies had already established. As a result of this ordeal, many of the unhoused residents received little to no support. Some were left stranded, and some even lost contact with their shelters and loved ones, leaving them in very dangerous situations. Problems didn't end after getting on planes. In fact, there was a whole new set of problems in Alberta. Aside from the separation of groups, some hotels in Alberta were not equipped to assist the homeless, and there was a lack of social workers to support them in the beginning. Without mental health supports, many turned to substance use to cope with the stress. At the same time, many sites typically don't allow alcohol and cannabis use, resulting in the eviction of homeless evacuees. With no ID, money, phone, toiletries, people were stranded in a much larger city with no knowledge of what resources and supports are out there. These circumstances created dangerous conditions for those experiencing addiction, such as violence, drug overdose, withdrawal symptoms, and contaminated drug supplies. From the City of Calgary's side, I had the fortunate opportunity to speak with someone closely involved with the emergency planning and worked closely with the Calgary Emergency Management Agency and various Calgary nonprofit organizations. I was able to learn about their experiences in coordinating and establishing essential services as the host cities. They shared very insightful reflections about what they did well and what could be improved upon. One of the key takeaways I got from our conversation was the importance of clear communication of information and clear roles, positions, and expectations during emergencies. Running a large-scale operation designed to take in 5,000 residents was like opening a small city within a large city. This was possible because of a well-developed plan already in place. The roles of each group and individuals and their expectations were very clear, and the lines of communication between government departments and various nonprofits were open. While the City of Calgary was a great example of what strong government leadership and communication should look like, there was still gaps in the emergency plan, many of which affected vulnerable populations. The gaps identified here share similar perspectives as the Yellowknife agencies. The City of Calgary found that there was very limited information about evacuees and their needs, which made it very hard for the City of Calgary and agencies to prepare and mobilize the right type of social services for the marginalized. The first issue was communication and coordination between other levels of government. Jurisdictional power became a barrier to execute plans efficiently. Messages kept going back and forth, and communication lines had to go through several levels of government and different agencies multiple times, resulting in many delays in getting the help evacuees needed. The second issue was that the infrastructure in Calgary was not set up to temporarily house thousands of people and provide large group accommodations in such a short time, which may have been a contributor to why some vulnerable groups were separated in Alberta. Although the Calgary Hotel Association had set aside their rooms and relaxed policies for evacuees, hotels were not equipped to provide these types of services. This was a missed opportunity between the city and the Calgary Hotel Association and various nonprofit agencies to have conversations for the best way to set up a large range of services and have more social workers in the hotels to advocate for the needs of the unhoused and the most vulnerable, while providing them with the connections and resources they require to address their diverse needs during traumatic times. In several ways, the Yellowknife evacuation became an unintentional case study of emergency response and recovery frameworks and the oversight of ethical considerations in their policy. Although Yellowknife's evacuation order was enacted to ensure the safety of all Yellowknife residents, the emergency response only highlights the gaps and the perpetuation of colonial violence in our systems by taking vulnerable groups and placing them in even more precarious positions. However, it's important to acknowledge that planning an emergency response with the cooperation of multiple levels of governments in just a few days is an extraordinary task to undertake. But these hardships and oversights should be lessons that decision makers can take from and be adapted so that no further harm is done to already vulnerable groups. After reflecting on climate injustice and my learnings through the lived experiences of the marginalized, I've come to the conclusion that climate action needs to involve the social realities and inequities in relation to the environment. If the Yellowknife evacuation framework had involved more social work perspectives, I believe that there would have been more ethical considerations of effectively supporting the vulnerable, while keeping them safe in a sustainable way, along with creating more opportunities for the individual and community resilience during traumatic times. In the last part of the podcast, I found some themes from the lessons learned from this evacuation and how we can make things different for the next wildfire season. There were a few commonalities reflected through the different accounts of the evacuation of the unhoused population. These shared experiences also reinforce the findings from an article I found from the Homeless Hub in 2023 titled A Response Framework for Addressing the Risks of Climate Change for the Homeless Populations by Sean Kidd and collaborators, which looks at policy design that specifically addresses the impacts of climate change on the homeless populations. It also looked at mitigation and emergency response policies that consider those impacts and outcomes. The article outlines a few key policy insights that would be effective for the unhoused and other vulnerable populations. 1. Need for preventative measures. 2. The emphasis on strong communication and collaboration, incorporating input from the vulnerable and their staff in the assessment and planning in the event of a climate disaster and also during crisis. 3. The need for clear plans during and after crisis explicitly for the unhoused. And 4. Using trauma-informed, culturally situated, and intersectional approaches. The biggest takeaway that was reiterated was the need for transparent communication, collaboration, and preparation in emergency management. Even though Calgary did face some challenges in providing the right kinds of services for the vulnerable, and there were things that could be improved on, the Yellowknife Women's Society wrote an open letter to program participants, staff, and community of Yellowknife. The letter comments on the strong collaboration between the City of Calgary, communities, and nonprofit agencies, providing support to them and their participants. This is an example of what effective communication should look like across multiple agencies, jurisdictions, and provinces. The second theme that emerged was the importance of having an extensive range of services that is trauma-informed. As evidenced by the experiences of the unhoused, it's not enough to just provide housing for the vulnerable. Diverse needs are just a fraction of the experiences of the ongoing social issues that are worsened by climate change. The oversight to address these social issues had consequences for all those that were involved. For example, we saw a cycle of violence between the City of Calgary, the hotels, and the unhoused. In times of crisis, it's not surprising to see that people will turn to different coping strategies. With the lack of support and training hotel staff, tensions rise, ending in eviction. In the case of few of the Women's Society's participants, some even went missing for the entire evacuation, even after Yellowknife had opened up. The Women's Society also learned through word of mouth that 2 of their participants passed away in Alberta due to overdosing. Perhaps if a harm reduction model had been implemented, it could have prevented those deaths. This shows how important creating a master list is during an emergency response. It's standard to have residents register in evacuation centers. So why is it that the marginalized are the exception? For the unhoused, there are many obstacles for them to establish contact than the average person. So in addition to having master lists of the vulnerable, host agencies can support individuals by asking them if they have permission to share their whereabouts when they check into the agency instead of having individuals initiate contact without breaking confidentiality. The final theme was the importance of preventative measures. Many stakeholders acknowledge that issues persist even after returning. According to the Canadian Human Rights Commission, housing is a human right. If it is a human right, why are houses so unaffordable? Why are prices increasing exponentially? We know that housing serves as a foundation to a stable life and increases quality of life. According to the response framework mentioned earlier, housing as a preventative measure should focus on affordability and improving the quality of housing and living conditions, which increases resilience to climate shock, minimizes social, economic, and health risks during crisis. All levels of government should be planning for future weather exposures and housing degradations in response to the impending certainty of climate disasters by implementing mitigation and climate adaptation policies that prioritize the vulnerable. Cities that host evacuees and refugees also need to consider establishing temporary housing in case of emergencies like these. This would better improve infrastructure and accommodate larger groups, avoiding problems participants from the Women's Society experienced. The housing issue is more than just homelessness. It's also about poverty and the many factors associated with poverty. If we want to consider long-term and sustainable solutions to climate change for the unhoused and impoverished, ending poverty should be a prioritized strategy not just for Yellowknife, but also for Canada and the rest of the world. Sustainable Development Goals number 1, No Poverty, calls to end poverty in all of its forms everywhere by 2030. Canada has adopted the Sustainable Development Goals. As of 2020, Canada has seen progress with this goal, meeting the goal of reducing poverty by 20% compared to 2015 levels. However, there has been an increase in the rate of poverty during the COVID-19 pandemic. While Canada has been working towards ending poverty by 2030, it will be a challenging target to hit given current conditions, such as limited supply of affordable housing, economic inflation, and climate change. In conclusion, the 2023 Yellowknife evacuation not only sheds light on the precarious situations the vulnerable residents of Yellowknife face, but also reminds us that the rest of Canada could be in similar situations. Everyone on this land has a stake in the shared responsibilities of taking care of this land and the people in it. We see from many lived experiences the inflation of inequities, injustices, and violence, and erasure of oppressed voices. These stories reveal how deeply entrenched social oppression and power imbalances are during times of crisis. We've seen how environmental injustice is manifested through unhoused groups. They were disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change, ranging from food insecurity, lack of shelter, communication, safety, physical and mental health, to say the least. Not to mention how colonial violence has played an influential role in land theft, environmental degradation, and other injustices from both the past and present. In response to environmental injustices and inequities, we must be proactive and learn to adapt and build community resiliency, especially among vulnerable community members. Response and evacuation is built from transparency, trust, engagement, and collaboration between the community and its members, organizations, and governments, along with the stakeholders in host cities. Going back to the first activity and reflecting on what you know now, I want you to think about your own role during the disasters and what you can do to support those who might run into additional barriers, like the experiences of the unhoused. I want you to think about your own roles during the disasters and what you can do to support those who might run into additional barriers, like the experiences of the unhoused. Have you considered what your plan to evacuate would look like? Have you considered what resources and agencies would be available in the cities and communities you might end up in? What would you pack in your emergency bag? Would you consider packing extra food, clothes, and other essentials in case someone might need it? These considerations might not be applicable to you. You might think to yourself, I don't know anyone who might need my support, or what are the chances of coming across a vulnerable person like that? Just know that that vulnerable person could be a parent, grandparent, sibling, loved one, or friend who is having a hard time contacting their friends and family. The unhoused are someone's loved one, and some of them still have not made it home and are still considered missing. A small gesture of support can be a seed of resilience for the vulnerable.
Thank you for listening to the Climate Action and Advocacy on the Airwaves. We hope you enjoyed your time here. This project was undertaken with the financial support of the University of Calgary's Mobilizing Alberta Climate Action Grant Program. We are broadcasting on 90.9 FM CJSW in Calgary. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The City of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the airwaves soon.